There is a moment in every significant love story where you can point and say, there, that was the moment. Before that moment, everything was one thing. After it, everything was something else. For me, that moment was not a conversation. It was not a look across a room, not a realization arriving quietly in the middle of an ordinary day, not the careful accumulation of months of proximity producing a conclusion I could no longer avoid. It was a hand. His hand, finding mine in the dark of a hospital room at 11:47 at night while he was half-conscious from pain medication and I was sitting in the chair beside his bed because I had not been able to make myself leave. He grabbed my hand the way drowning people grab things. Not romantic, not intentional, not the gesture of someone making a declaration. The instinct of someone who needed an anchor and found one. I held on. And everything we had been carefully not being to each other for 2 years came through that contact. Through his fingers and mine. Through the dark hospital room and the monitors and the distant sound of the ward and the specific quality of a night that changes the shape of what comes after. My name is Marco Reyes. I was 27 years old. I played left midfield for the Atlanta Athletic FC reserve squad. And the man whose hand changed my life was my teammate, my rival, my closest friend, and the person I had been in love with since the second week of the season. His name was James Callahan. And this is how we got to that hospital room. Professional soccer at the reserve level is a specific kind of existence. Not the glamour version, not the stadium lights and the television contracts and the merchandise deals. The reserve level is the version that happens in training facilities at 7 in the morning, in buses to away matches in cities 2 hours distant, in the particular grinding determination of people who are good enough to be here and not yet certain whether here is a stepping stone or a destination. The Atlanta Athletic Reserve Squad had 23 players. I had been with the club for 3 years, which made me a veteran of sorts, one of the longer-serving members of a roster that turned over with the specific regularity of a level where development was the point and retention was a pleasant surprise. I loved it, not in spite of its imperfections but including them, the daily work of it. The specific physical language of the game, which was the first language I had ever been fluent in, the one I had learned in Miami from a father who had played semi-professionally in Puerto Rico and who had put a ball at my feet before I could reliably walk. Soccer was not what I did, it was what I was, the place where the inside and the outside of me matched. James Callahan arrived at the beginning of my 3rd season. He came from a club in the English Championship, a loan deal, a development opportunity, a chance to play in a different tactical system before returning to a club that considered him a genuine first-team prospect. He was 26, Irish, with the specific physical authority of a center-back who has been told since he was 14 that his body is a professional asset, and has responded to this information by taking his physical condition seriously without becoming vain about it. He was tall, dark hair, the kind that did whatever it wanted after training. Blue eyes that were either cold or warm depending entirely on context, cold during matches, where his focus was total and unsparing, warm in the changing room after when the match was over and the professional mask came off. He was also, I understood within a week, extremely good. The kind of good that is inconvenient to notice in a teammate because it bypasses the professional and becomes something else. Something closer to the specific admiration that is one step removed from something you do not want to name in a changing room. I named it to myself very quickly, in the privacy of my own interior where I had been out to myself since I was 19 and out to people I trusted since I was 22. I named it and I filed it under things that are true and not actionable and moved on. Or tried to. We were put together by the demands of training. The reserve squad's tactical system relied heavily on the left back and left mid relationship. The channel between us was where a significant portion of our attacking play was built. This meant that James and I trained together in specific combinations daily, that we communicated constantly during sessions, that the physical and tactical understanding between us developed faster than either of us had perhaps anticipated. He was direct in communication. This was immediately apparent. He did not soften tactical feedback or wrap criticism in social cushioning. He said what he saw. The first time he told me my positioning on a set piece was wrong, it was delivered with the specific bluntness of someone who expects to be argued with if he is incorrect. I argued he was not incorrect, I acknowledged this. He looked at me with the blue eyes. "You take feedback well," he said. in the accent that I had already spent an embarrassing amount of mental energy noticing. Only when the feedback is right, I said. Fair enough, he said. We went back to the drill. But something had been established. The mutual recognition of two people who communicate directly and respond to directness in kind. The foundation of a professional relationship that became, over the first month, something more than professional. He asked me once after training where to eat in Atlanta that was not a chain restaurant and not performatively expensive. I took him to the Salvadoran place on Buford Highway that my teammate Diego had introduced me to 2 years before. He ate everything. He asked the server questions about the food with the specific genuine curiosity of someone who has traveled enough to know that questions about food are the most direct form of interest in a culture. Your Spanish is good, I said. Barcelona, he said, 2 years, youth loan at 16. You learned Spanish at 16 in Barcelona. I learned everything at 16 in Barcelona, he said, with the expression of someone whose 16-year-old self would be surprised by what the experience had produced. Such as? He looked at me across the table. How to be somewhere that isn't home, he said, and find what's worth keeping in it. I held this. What did you keep from Barcelona? I asked. The Spanish, he said, the food preferences, one friend who's now coaching in La Liga, a pause, the understanding that being away from home is not the same as being lost. I looked at him. You've moved around a lot, I said. The job requires it, he said, you get used to arriving new. Do you? I asked. He looked at me steadily. You stop being afraid of it, he said, that's not quite the same as used to, but it's enough. I thought about this for a long time after the dinner. About arriving new and not being afraid of it. About a person who had learned, through the specific education of repeated relocation, that finding what's worth keeping was the skill that mattered. I wondered what he had kept from Atlanta. I wondered when he would leave. I will not compress them entirely. The 2 years between his arrival and the injury deserve more than summary because they were the 2 years in which James Callahan became the most significant person in my life without either of us saying anything about what that meant. We were friends, genuinely, deeply, in the specific way that shared physical endeavor and daily proximity produce when two people are also genuinely compatible. We talked about soccer with the honest analytical attention of professionals who respect each other's understanding of the game. We talked about other things too, his family in Cork, Ireland, the large, warm, complicated Catholic household he had come from, his relationship with his father who had played for Munster RFC and had needed some convincing that his son's choice of sport was legitimate. My family in Miami, the Puerto Rican American household with the father who had made me a soccer player and the mother who had made me everything else. I told him I was gay in October of the first year. Not dramatically, there was no big moment. We were driving back from an away match and the conversation had reached a point where the information was relevant, and I offered it with the matter-of-fact directness I had developed over years of being out in environments that were not always certain to be safe. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Thank you for telling me." "You're not," I paused, "I know not everyone is comfortable with." "Marco," he said, his voice was even. "I grew up in Cork with 2 gay uncles who were together for 30 years. I played in Barcelona at 16 and had teammates from everywhere with every configuration of private life imaginable." He looked at the road. "I'm not the person you need to worry about." I looked at him. "Good," I said. "Good," he said. We drove the rest of the way back in the comfortable silence that had become the characteristic of long drives together. But something had shifted, something small, the specific shift that happens when a truth is given and received without flinching, when the person on the other side of the truth proves themselves trustworthy with it. I did not tell him the rest of the truth. The rest of the truth being that the person I was in love with was sitting in the driver's seat 12 inches to my right, and had been for the past 6 months. I did not tell him that for 2 years. It happened in March. A cup match, a Tuesday evening in a regional stadium with a few thousand people in the stands and the specific intensity of a knockout competition that regular season matches do not always produce. We were winning 1-0 in the 78th minute. James was the reason we were winning. He had defended with the total authority that was the quality that had made him a professional prospect at 16 and had only deepened with years of daily work. He was everywhere on the field that needed him. He organized the defense with the specific vocal confidence of a natural leader. 78th minute. A long ball over the top, the opposing striker running onto it. James tracking back, positioning himself to intercept, calculating the angle with the automatic competence of someone who had made this calculation 10,000 times. He planted his left foot. The angle was wrong, not his fault. The pitch surface, soft from 2 days of rain, gave way under him in a way no calculation could have predicted. His knee buckled sideways. The sound. People who have heard a knee injury in a quiet moment of a match know the sound. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is the specific quiet terrible sound of something that should not bending. He went down. He did not get up. I was 40 yards away. I was running toward him before I had consciously decided to run. Not because I was the nearest player, I was not the nearest player. Because some instruction more fundamental than thought had issued from somewhere inside me and my body had followed it. I reached him. He was on the ground on his side, his hands on his knee, his face with an expression I had never seen on it in 2 years of knowing him. Not pain exactly, or pain, yes, but underneath the pain something else. The specific frightened expression of a professional athlete who has felt something they have been afraid of feeling their entire career. James, I said. I was kneeling beside him on the wet pitch. It's bad, he said. His voice was controlled with the effort that control requires when something is genuinely bad. I know, I said, don't move. The medical staff arrived. The substitution was made. The match continued around us because matches continue, because the game is larger than any single person in it, because that is both the beauty and the cruelty of team sport. They carried him off the field. I watched them carry him and felt something that the 2 years of careful management had not prepared me for. Not the managed version of what I felt for him. The whole of it. Unmanaged, complete, too large for the container I had built for it. Cliffhanger line 4 voicover. The match ended, we won 1-0. In the changing room afterward, the team was subdued in the way teams are when a result that should feel good is shadowed by something that does not. People asked about James. I told them what I knew, which was not enough. I showered and I dressed and I sat on the bench in front of my locker for longer than I normally would. The team left in groups. The coach spoke to me briefly. James had been taken to the hospital. Preliminary assessment suggested the knee was serious. He would know more in the morning. I said good. I said thank you. I said I would check on him. And then I drove to the hospital, not because I was asked to, not because it was expected, because I could not make myself do anything else. Because the whole of what I felt had broken out of the container I had built for it and was now simply present, undeniable, requiring action. I drove to the hospital. I parked the car. I went in. And I did not know, sitting in the chair beside his bed in the room they put him in, that the night I was about to have would change both of our lives completely. He was in a private room on the 2nd floor. The nurse at the desk was skeptical of me at 11 in the evening. Visiting hours had ended at 9. And I told her I was family with the specific calm of someone who has decided that the technicalities of a situation are less important than the situation itself. She looked at me for a moment. Something in my face must have communicated something honest, because she said, 20 minutes, and directed me to the room. He was awake? Barely. The pain medication was in the process of doing what pain medication does, taking the sharp edges off the immediate physical experience while leaving the person in a specific suspended state, present but not fully, aware but softened. The room was small and the light was the low institutional light of a ward at night. He was in the bed with the injured leg elevated and a blanket over him and the expression of someone working hard to remain coherent. He looked at me when I came in. You came, he said. Yes, I said. The match. 1-0, I said. We won. He closed his eyes briefly. Good. I sat in the chair beside the bed. The chair that changed everything. Not yet, that was later. First there was the sitting and the being present and the gradual subsiding of his wakefulness as the medication did its full work. He asked me at some point in the first hour what the medical staff had said. I told him what I knew: preliminary assessment, likely significant ligament damage, MRI in the morning, the team medical officer would be there at 8. He listened with the focused attention of someone absorbing information they knew was important even through a haze. Worst case, he said. We don't know yet. Worst case, Marco, he said, the directness even now. ACL, I said, possibly additional structures. He was quiet. Timeline, he said. 9 months minimum, I said, possibly 12. The quiet that followed had a specific quality. The silence of a professional athlete absorbing the possibility of a year outside the thing that defines them. Not the casual observer's version of that silence. This was the real version, the one that contains the full weight of an identity built over a lifetime being placed in sudden uncertainty. I did not fill the silence. I let it be what it was. The loan, he said eventually. I don't know, I said honestly, that's a conversation for the morning. If the loan ends, he said, if they recall me. James, I said. He stopped, the medication blurring the edges of the sentence. I was just starting to feel like this was, he stopped again. Starting to feel like this was what? I asked. He looked at me. Worth keeping, he said. The phrase from the Buford Highway dinner 2 years ago, about Barcelona, about arriving new and finding what was worth keeping. I looked at him in the low hospital light. It still is, I said, whatever happens with the loan, whatever happens with the knee, I paused, Atlanta is still here. He looked at me for a long moment. Then his eyes closed. Not choosing to close them, the medication making the choice. He slept. I stayed. 11:47. I know the time because I had been watching the clock on the wall with the specific insomniac attention of someone who is sitting in a hospital chair, unable to leave and measuring the night in minutes. He had been sleeping for an hour. His breathing was even. The room was quiet except for the distant sounds of the ward and the low hum of the equipment and the specific quality of a hospital night, which is unlike any other kind of night. I should have left. Every practical argument pointed toward leaving. Visiting hours were technically over. I had morning training. The nurse had said 20 minutes. The reasonable, practical, managed version of myself had a list of reasons that the chair beside James Callahan's hospital bed was not where I needed to be at midnight. But I was not the managed version of myself tonight. Tonight the whole of it was out of the container. Tonight I was simply the person who was in love with the man in the bed and could not make himself leave. He moved in his sleep. A shift of position, the instinctive adjustment of someone in pain even in sleep. His right hand, which had been resting on the blanket, moved. It found my hand. Not consciously, not intentionally. The instinct of someone who, even in sleep, had registered that there was a presence beside them and had reached toward it. His hand closed around mine. The grip of someone who needed an anchor. I did not move. I sat in the hospital chair at 11:47 at night with James Callahan's hand holding mine and felt the full weight of 2 years of carefully managed feeling pass through that contact. Not a declaration, not a romantic gesture, the unconscious reach of a person in pain toward the nearest warmth. But his hand knew where to reach. In sleep, without the management, without the professional distance, without the careful architecture of a friendship that both of us had built partly to contain something neither of us had named, in sleep, his hand reached for mine. I held it. I held it for the rest of the night. He woke at 6. The light had changed from the artificial low of hospital night to the beginning of real morning, gray and specific, coming through the blind on the window. He was more alert than the night before. The medication had metabolized to a level that left him present. He looked at the room, at the window, at me. At our hands. Still connected, I had not moved in 6 hours. He looked at our hands for a long moment. Then he looked at me. I did not take my hand away. I had decided this somewhere in the middle of the night, that when he woke and found this, I would not make it something manageable by removing it. I would let it be what it was. Whatever that was. You stayed, he said. Yes, I said. All night. Yes. He looked at our hands again. Marco, he said. James. I grabbed your hand, he said, not a question, acknowledging. Yes, I said, you were sleeping. I know, he said. He paused. I wasn't entirely sleeping. The room, the morning light, the monitors. What? I said. Around 2 in the morning, he said. I was in between, not asleep, not awake, and I could feel, he stopped. I could feel your hand, and I knew it was yours. I knew I was holding on, and I knew it was you. I held this. And you didn't let go, I said. No, he said. We looked at each other in the hospital morning. 2 years of managed distance. 2 years of building a friendship that was also a container. 2 years of finding what was worth keeping and not saying that the most worth keeping thing was the person across from you in it. James, I said. I know, he said. Do you? I said, because I need to say it. I've needed to say it for 2 years and I need to say it now. I looked at him directly. I'm in love with you. I have been since October of the first season. I've been not saying it because, I stopped. Because I didn't know if you were someone I could say it to. He was very still. You can say it to me, he said quietly. I just did, I said. Say it again, he said, not demanding. The request of someone who has been waiting for something and needs to hear it twice to believe it arrived. I'm in love with you, I said. He closed his eyes. Not the medication this time. Something else. When he opened them, his expression was the one I had seen in the changing room after matches when the professional mask came off. The warm version of his blue eyes, the version without the management. I've been afraid of this, he said, of saying it, of it being said. He paused. I don't stay places, Marco. That's been my whole career, loan to loan, club to club. I arrive new and I find what's worth keeping and then I go to the next place. He looked at our hands. And then I came here and I found something that I did not want to leave, and it made the leaving feel more frightening than it had ever felt before. Because of me, I said. Because of you, he said. Because of, he gestured with his free hand. The gesture that meant the team and the city and the Buford Highway restaurant and the long drives and the 2 years of everything. All of it, but mostly you. Then don't leave, I said simply. He looked at me. The loan. The loan is a conversation for the club, I said. That's separate. I'm not asking you to solve the loan. I'm asking you to, I stopped, found the right words. I'm asking you to stop making decisions about this, I held up our joined hands. Based on what might happen, I'm asking you to be here, now, with me. He looked at our hands. Then at me. I'm not going anywhere today, he said, given the circumstances. No, I said, you're not. Tomorrow is a different question, he said. The MRI, the club, the loan terms. Tomorrow is tomorrow, I said. He nodded slowly. Okay, he said, today then. Today, I agreed. The morning continued around us. The ward woke up. The nurse came and went. The team medical officer arrived at 8 as promised, and the conversation about the MRI and the timeline and the loan was had with the professional clarity that those conversations require. I stayed for all of it. Not as a teammate, not as a friend. As the person who was holding his hand, which I did not stop doing until the medical officer arrived and practicality required both hands to be available. But James looked at me when I released his hand to make room for the doctor. And the look said, I know you're still here. I am still here. Cliffhanger line 4 VOICOVER. The MRI happened at noon. I waited. The results came at 3 in the afternoon and the team medical officer delivered them with the direct honesty that medical professionals owe their patients. ACL, complete rupture, partial damage to the medial collateral, surgery within the week, recovery 9 to 12 months minimum. James listened to all of this with the focused attention he gave everything. He asked the right questions. He thanked the doctor. And when the doctor left and we were alone again in the hospital room in the afternoon light, he was quiet for a long time. And then he looked at me and he said, tell me something true, not about the knee, not about the loan or the timeline or what happens next, something true about something else. And I looked at him and I said, I have been happy this year in a way I have not been before. And he said, I know, I have too, and neither of us needed to say more than that. Not yet, there was time. There was, for the first time in 2 years of watching the clock and dreading his departure, actual time. 9 months. Long enough to change everything. Long enough to find out whether the thing said in a hospital room on a March morning was the beginning of something or a moment produced by the specific intensity of crisis that does not survive the return to ordinary life. It survived. It was stronger in ordinary life than it had been in crisis, which was, I had come to understand, the only reliable test of whether something was real. The loan terms were renegotiated. The parent club, understanding that a recovered James Callahan was more valuable than a recalled injured one, agreed to extend the loan through the full recovery period. This was a professional decision. It was also the decision that gave us time that the original loan structure had not included. He moved out of the temporary accommodation the club had provided. He moved into the apartment 2 buildings down from mine in the Inman Park neighborhood. This was practical. I could help with the logistics of early recovery, the appointments, the rehabilitation sessions at the training facility. It was also, as both of us acknowledged without making it more significant than it was, the decision of someone who had decided that Atlanta was worth keeping and wanted to be close to the specific thing that made it worth keeping. The early months of recovery are not romantic. I say this because the story deserves honesty. The early months of a significant knee surgery are the specific unglamorous reality of pain management and physical therapy and the grinding discipline of a professional athlete trusting the process of rebuilding something their entire professional identity is built upon. I was there for it. Not every moment I had training, I had matches, I had my own professional life continuing. But I was there in the margins of it, the rides to rehabilitation. The evenings when the pain was manageable but the frustration was not, when he was 3 weeks post-surgery and could see the 9-month timeline stretching ahead and the specific emotional difficulty of patience was testing everything he had. I did not offer false comfort. This was, I think, the most important thing I could have offered him. He had people in his life who offered false comfort, who said you'll be back before you know it and it'll fly by and you'll come back stronger. These things were possibly true and were useless as comfort because they skipped over the reality of the present moment in favor of the hypothetical future. I said today was hard, I know it was hard, that's what today was. And the next session will be its own thing. You don't have to solve 9 months tonight. And sometimes I brought food from the Buford Highway place, eat something. He told me once in April, 5 weeks post-surgery, that I was the most useful person he had ever had in his life. Most people want to fix it, he said, you just stay in it. I'm not going anywhere, I said, with a specificity that we both heard. He looked at me. No, he said, you're not. The months of recovery produced conversations that 2 years of friendship had not. Not because we had not talked, we had talked extensively about everything. But the container that the professional distance had provided had shaped the conversations, had given them a shape that kept them from reaching certain depths. Without the container, the conversations reached the depths. He told me about the relationship he had in Barcelona at 22. A man named Pau, a Catalan defender at the club who had been James's first real relationship and his first real heartbreak, not because of any dramatic failing, but because the loan had ended and Pau had been tied to his club and his city and James had moved on to the next thing. That was when I decided arriving new was just what I did, he said. That attachment was the problem, that if I didn't let places become home then leaving them wouldn't cost anything. Did it work, I asked. For a while, he said, and then I came to Atlanta. I looked at him. And Atlanta was different, I said. You were different, he said, the first person in years who made me want to stop being someone who doesn't stay. I told him about my longest relationship, a man named Daniel 2 years before, which had ended with the specific quiet that relationships end with when both people have grown in incompatible directions. Not dramatic, not unkind, just finished. Were you in love with him? James asked. I thought so at the time, I said. In retrospect, I think I was in love with the idea of a relationship more than the specific person. I paused. It's different from what this is. How? He asked. With Daniel, I was always slightly performing, I said, being the version of myself I thought the relationship required. I looked at him. With you, I haven't performed anything from the beginning. You're the first person I've been exactly myself with. He was quiet. That's the most important thing you've said to me, he said. I know, I said. More important than the hospital room. More important than the hospital room, I agreed, because the hospital room was a crisis. I stopped. This is just Tuesday and I'm exactly myself on Tuesday with you. He reached over and he took my hand. Not the hospital grab, not the unconscious anchor of a person in pain. The deliberate, conscious choice of someone who knows what they are doing and is doing it with full intention. I've never been exactly myself anywhere, he said. Everywhere I go I arrive new and I find what's worth keeping and I perform everything else. He held my hand. Here I stopped performing. When? I asked. The Buford Highway restaurant, he said. First month, you asked what I kept from Barcelona and I told you the truth instead of the easy version. He paused. I don't usually tell the truth instead of the easy version. You made it seem like the natural thing to do. It is the natural thing to do, I said. Not for me, he said, not before this. He returned to training in December. 9 months and 3 weeks from the surgery, the rehabilitation had been exact and complete. The medical team signed off. The first session back was careful, controlled, monitored, the club managing the return with professional caution. I watched him from the far side of the training pitch. The first time he actually ran, not the careful jog of late-stage rehabilitation but the real run, the professional athlete's run, the one that is entirely different from the way ordinary people run because it carries the specific authority of a body that has been trained to do this for 20 years. I felt something that was not mine to name. He stopped, he turned, he looked across the pitch at me. He was grinning, the specific grin of someone who has been given back the thing they were most afraid of losing. I grinned back. From 40 yards, in the December morning, in front of 22 teammates who were paying varying degrees of attention. He jogged across the pitch toward me. Well, he said when he reached me. The left knee looks a little hesitant on acceleration, I said. He looked at me. Seriously, he said. Give it another week, I said. He laughed, the laugh that arrived rarely and completely, the one I had been cataloging for 2 years and had been hearing more frequently in the months of recovery. You are the most annoying person I know, he said. You love me, I said, the casual deployment of the word, the natural sentence in a moment that made it natural. He looked at me. Yes, he said simply, directly, without managing it, I do. The training pitch, the December morning, 22 teammates at varying distances. Good, I said. Good, he said. We went back to training. January. The club offered James a full contract. Not a loan extension, a permanent contract. The parent club, whose first team ambitions had shifted in the months of James's recovery, had agreed to a permanent transfer at a fee that the Atlanta athletic director described as reasonable and that James described as fair. He was staying. Not for a season, not for another loan period. Staying. He told me, at the Buford Highway restaurant, the same table or near it, the same server who had seen us enough times in 2.5 years to bring the usual without being asked. He put the contract paperwork on the table. I looked at it. Then at him. You signed it, I said. This morning, he said. I looked at the paperwork, at the Atlanta athletic letterhead, at his signature on the bottom. James, I said. I know, he said. You're staying. I'm staying, he said. Atlanta is, he stopped, the expression of someone for whom the right word is something larger than the ones available. Atlanta is the place I stopped leaving. I looked at him across the restaurant table. 2.5 years? A knee injury and a hospital room and 9 months of rehabilitation and the daily, ordinary, extraordinary work of 2 people building something real. It's because of me, I said, not a question. It's because of all of it, he said. The club, the city, the team, the food on this table. He paused. But mostly because of you, because you are the thing I found in Atlanta that was worth keeping, and I am done being the person who leaves the things worth keeping. I reached across the table. I put my hand on his. Not the hospital grab, not the unconscious anchor, the deliberate choice of a person who has made a decision and is expressing it through the most direct available means. You know, I said, the first time you grabbed my hand I thought it was the medication. Partially, he said. And when you woke up and found us still connected, you said you hadn't been entirely sleeping. I hadn't, he said. So you chose, I said, even then. He looked at our hands on the restaurant table. Even then, he said, I chose. March, 1 year from the injury. The anniversary was not intentional. The fixture list does not arrange itself for emotional significance. But the home match against the same opponent, on almost exactly the same date as the match in which James had gone down, was on the calendar regardless of what it meant. He played. Not the whole match. The coach managed the return with professional caution, 90 minutes being ambitious for a first competitive appearance after a 9-month absence. He played 67 minutes. In those 67 minutes, he was everything that 2 years of watching him had shown me he was. The authority, the organization, the specific physical intelligence of a defender who reads the game with his whole body rather than just his eyes. At the 67th minute, the substitution board went up, his number. He jogged toward the touchline. The home crowd, who had been following his recovery with the specific investment that fans develop for athletes whose struggles have been visible, gave him the reception that those moments deserve. Full, warm, the sound of people acknowledging what they had witnessed. He reached the touchline, accepted the applause, looked at the dugout. And then he looked at the stand where, because the reserve squad staff were watching from the same area as the family and partner allocations, I was sitting. He found me. In a stand of several hundred people, he found me. He did not gesture, he did not perform anything for the cameras or the crowd, he simply looked. And the look carried everything: the hospital room and the hand and the 9 months and the contract on the Buford Highway restaurant table and the 2.5 years of everything before and after. I looked back. And that was enough. That has always been enough. Summary. The season ended. The club finished third in the league, which was the best result in 5 years, and produced in the squad the specific satisfied exhaustion of people who have given a full season of themselves to something and found the giving worthwhile. James and I. We were not secret and we were not performed. We were simply present in the way that two people who have stopped performing are present. The team knew, teams always know. Athletes are more perceptive about the people they share physical space with daily than any other professional group. And the team, with the specific pragmatism of a group whose primary concern is whether you can play, responded with the collective shrug of people for whom this information was already accounted for. The older players on the squad, the ones who had been in professional sports long enough to have seen everything, said nothing and changed nothing. 2 of the younger players asked careful, respectful questions and were answered honestly. One player made a comment in training that was addressed immediately, firmly, and without drama by the senior players before anyone else had to. The team was the team. James flew to Cork in July to see his family. He had told them about me in May, a phone call to his mother that he described as shorter than he had expected because his mother, who had known him longer than anyone, said "I know, love" before he had finished the sentence. The 2 uncles, the ones who had been together for 30 years, called him separately. Each of them said a version of the same thing: it gets easier, not the being in love, that was already easy, the rest of it. The public part, the navigating a world that was better than it had been and not yet what it should be. It gets easier. I flew to Cork in August. The large, warm, complicated Catholic household received me with the specific thoroughness of an Irish family that expresses welcome through feeding people and interrogating them simultaneously. His mother was exactly what I had expected from everything James had told me about her. The woman who had looked at her son when he called and said "I know" before he finished the sentence was recognizably the same woman who looked at me across the dinner table and said "You're good for him. I can see it." His father, former rugby player, large and quiet in the way that large, quiet people are quiet, not absence of feeling but the choice to express it differently. He shook my hand on the first evening with the grip of a man who understood that physical contact was a language. A real handshake, not performative, the genuine article. He said, "James tells us you stayed with him in the hospital after the match." I said I couldn't leave. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, "Good man," and went back to the table. Which was, James told me later, the highest possible praise available from that particular source. March, 2 years from the injury. We were back at the stadium, not as a coincidence this time. We had noticed the date and chosen it deliberately. The pitch in March, early morning before the training day began, before anyone else was there. The groundskeeping crew at the far end, maintaining the surface with their characteristic quiet attention. The stands empty, the morning gray and cold in the specific way that Georgia March mornings can be cold before the spring warmth they are promising. We stood at the spot. Not exactly the spot, there was no mark, no monument. The pitch did not remember what had happened in its specific location on its surface. But we knew approximately, left channel, 60 yards from the goal, where a long ball had come over the top and a knee had buckled on a wet surface and everything had changed. 1 year ago today, James said, I was in the physio room. 2 years ago today, I said, you were in the hospital. He looked at the pitch. 2 years ago today, he said, you were in the chair all night. Yes, I said. 2 years ago today, he said, I grabbed your hand. You were half asleep, I said. I was choosing, he said, I know the difference. We stood in the March morning at the spot where it started. Marco, he said. Yeah. Thank you for staying. I looked at him, the blue eyes in the morning light, the face that was warm the way it was always warm now, without the professional mask, without the management. Thank you for holding on, I said. He reached over. He took my hand. The deliberate, conscious, fully intended version. The one that was not the hospital grab, not the unconscious anchor, but the daily chosen thing. The thing he had been doing for over a year, with the consistency of someone who has decided that this is what staying looks like. His hand in mine. On the pitch where it started. In the morning. In Atlanta. In the place he had stopped leaving. Okay, he said. Okay, I said. And the groundskeeping crew continued their work at the far end of the pitch, and the city continued waking up around the stadium, and the morning continued being exactly what it was, ordinary and extraordinary simultaneously. The way all mornings are when you are living them with the right person. The hand that had changed everything. Still holding. Still held.